I've always been impressed by stories of courageous people on battlefields and in the midst of crisis. I know I'm not the only one. We love heroic stories of men and women who rise to the occasion of disaster and danger with courageous convictions. Yet there's no class or training program that can teach people to be heroic, to act courageously. Given that courage depends on the severity of its situation, there isn't much we can do to practice it. We recognize it in others, read about it in books, see it at work in news stories and documentaries, and we hope that it will be there when our time comes. Then one day, often quite unexpectedly, we too find ourselves thrust into a situation in which our courage is put to a very real test. Where does it come from? How can we be sure it will be there when we need it most? That question of courage sits at the heart of the Bible story of Esther. Esther also lived during the time of Israel's exile. Israel was now under the rule of the Persians, and in catching the eye of the Persian king, Esther was selected to become one of his royal wives and eventually named queen. It was a strange circumstance, especially given that the king was not aware of Esther's Jewish identity. Still, her selection put her in the proximity of the world's most powerful leader, a position few Israelites could have imagined. Through a long series of events, the Jews came to be under a royal decree of execution. The king made the decision under the advisement of Haman, who was determined to eradicate the Jews from Persia. The Persian king was completely unaware that his decree placed his own wife Esther under the order of execution. The king's decision sets the stage for Esther's test of courage. Though she was the king's wife, she had no right or power to make requests of him. To even approach him without his request was a violation of her privileges and punishable by death. Yet she knew she had no other choice. Esther discussed the situation, her plan, with her uncle, a man named Mordecai. He responded, "Don't think for a moment that because you're in the palace, you will escape when all other Jews are killed. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for just such a time as this?" Esther knew what she must do. "Go and gather together all of the Jews and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will do the same. And then, though it is against the law, I will go in to see the king. If I must die, I must die." That's courage. The stakes couldn't have been higher, yet her resolve rose to the moment. She sensed that God had all things timed and orchestrated for just this moment. One of the most interesting parts of Esther's story is that the book never directly mentions God. While God is a central character in the stories of Abraham, Moses, and David, in Esther, there's no mention of him. How strange that a book of the Bible wouldn't even mention God. But you can't read the story without sensing that God is directing almost every moment in this story. What some might call coincidence is to the one trained to see by faith clear evidence of God's sovereign hand. We come to recognize that even when we feel alone and overwhelmed by our circumstances, more is going on. Our courage is not an inner personal strength, but a deep conviction that God is at work and that His timing is perfect. That even when we can't see Him, He is in control. The courageous are those who act upon what they know. God is in this story. His timing and placement are perfect. Esther's story works out in miraculous ways. Her people saved, new favor with the king, and a great reversal as those who sought to destroy the Jews are instead expelled from power. Esther's faith and courage are at the very center of it. There's no way to guarantee courage. There's no way to prove God's timing. Like Esther, we are each given a simple question. Maybe God has us here for just such a time as this. By faith, we believe and we act. Our courage forms in that conviction. God is with us. Listen.